Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Thanks for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jessica Kofi. As college football fans know very well, the sport is full of storied traditions that don't just span centuries, but multiple categories as well. And one of the most deep, interesting, and unique to the NCAA is the history of live animal mascots. And they're seen throughout pop culture and loved by fan bases for decades now. But there's still not a ton of public knowledge on the background of live mascots and how they became as ingrained in college football as we see today. So this episode is all about 5 of the most well-known and, above all, cherished animal mascots in college football. And we're going to get started with the first mascot on this list, who has been called the best mascot in college football. And that is Uga, the bulldog from Georgia. And this mascot was born in 1955. The original Uga 1, his name was Hood Old Dan, but Uga 1 eventually was succeeded by his son, Old Dan's Uga, also known as Uga 2, at an impressive pregame ceremony at their homecoming game in 1966. And Uga 2 also had an impressive reign, and watched as Georgia participated in 5 bowl games, 2 SEC championships, and over the last century of college football play, Uga's done a lot to establish himself as the nation's, if not one of them, the most well-known mascot in America. And the line of pure white English bulldogs, which became the line of Ugas that we now see today, was originally owned by a man named Frank Sealer, who went by Sonny, and his family from Savannah, Georgia. And all of the dogs that have served as Ugas since have been part of the same lineage of bulldogs that started from Uga 1. And with a squishy bulldog face like that, nobody can possibly resist the charms of the pure white English bulldog Uga. And the name Uga came to be out of an abbreviation for the university, UGA, which shouldn't be any surprise, but the name was given to him by William Young of Columbus, who was a law school classmate of the Sealer family. And the newest edition of Ugas, Uga 10, whose nickname is Q, was formally introduced at Georgia's game against Georgia Southern in November of 2015. And he succeeded Uga 9, whose nickname was affectionately Russ, as their mascot, and now Q serves as the primary mascot for all of the games since 2015. So Russ, aka Uga 9, was the half-brother of Uga 7, and has served as an interim mascot for Georgia Bulldogs before he received a battlefield promotion in 2012, and he had to become an interim mascot following the unexpected death of Uga 7 in 2009. And he came in to support the Georgia fans for 2 games, the last 2 games of the 2009 season and the first 6 games in 2010. Unfortunately, the Bulldog Russ had to be pressed into the emergency role yet again before the 2010 Liberty Bowl after yet another untimely death, this time of Uga 8 in February 2011. And Uga 8 was in service since October 2010 before a game against Vanderbilt and served for less than a year before Russ resumed his emergency duties and roamed the sidelines at all 14 games during the 2011 season. Then he served for 2 wins at the beginning of the 2012 season before he was promoted officially to UGA 9. And clearly he had some spark of good luck with him because his time as a mascot included the 2011 and 2012 SEC Division Championship, 2 road wins at Georgia Tech, a victory over Texas A&M in the 2009 Independence Bowl, and a win at the Capital One Bowl in January of 2013 against Nebraska. So UGA 9 finished 2013 with an 8-5 record and completed the 2014 season with a 10-3 mark, capped off by a victory over Louisville in the Belk Bowl. So he was the first substitute mascot for Georgia since Otto back in 1986. As for UGA 7, aka Lawrence Best, who officially became the mascot when he was introduced in front of Georgia fans before the season opener in August of 2008, he was seen as a successful mascot, especially for a dog who was really chill and laid back. He wasn't bothered by the loud crowd noises or the excited fans who were clamoring to take pictures with him or airplanes that were flying overhead. But he was really heavy for a bulldog, weighing at over 56.5 pounds, and unfortunately he passed away unexpectedly in November of 2009 of heart-related issues. And since it was so unexpected, it was a weekday before their final home game of the season, they elected not to have a live mascot at the game, no emergency bulldog or anything, and instead they just chose to place a wreath at UGA 7's doghouse, and the players wore a special UGA 7 decal on their helmets to remember him. And right before UGA 7 came UGA 6, who was not only classified as the winningest mascot in school's history, but he's also the longest reigning mascot, serving more games than any other pup at 114. Now, UGA 6 was inducted into the Bulldog family a little earlier than most of the other ones. He was only a year old at his coronation, and the pre-game passing of the bone ceremony from UGA 5, his father, took place at the 1999 game against South Carolina. And UGA 6, whose nickname is What You Got Lauren, stands as the biggest of all of the mascots, weighing in at 65 pounds, which is 20 pounds heavier than his father before him. And What You Got Lauren's first season climaxed in a magnificent come-from-behind win over Purdue at the Outback Bowl, and the 25-point comeback was so unprecedented in Georgia's history and became the largest comeback in a college bowl in history. But it was UGA 4 who was perhaps the most active of all the mascots. And he stands as the only one to attend a bowl game in every single year of his service between 1981 and 1989. He took over after UGA 3 in the 81 season opener, and in his decade of service, the highlight of his career came when he made a personal appearance at the Heisman Trophy banquet with Herschel Walker in New York in December of 1982. But UGA 3 had career highlights of his own too. He was present for Georgia football's finest moment, as the very same Herschel Walker had led the Bulldogs to the 1980 national championship. But UGA 3 was with the Bulldogs through 6 bowl games in 9 years and closed out his career in the ultimate fashion by being part of the 1980 NCAA championship. And like the champ of champs, UGA 3 went out retiring during the 100th football game of his career during the season opener of the 1981 season and died just a few weeks later. But over all of these years, UGA's been defined by his spiked collar, which is a symbol of the position that he holds, and he now resides in a cool doghouse during football games. His on-field home is a permanent air-conditioned doghouse located right next to the cheerleaders platform, and it provides comfort for him in the heat of Georgia in August and September. And obviously, given all of this history and all of the milestones that the Bulldog has been there for, supporting the fans, it means a lot to fans of Georgia, And for the past 20 years, UGGA's jerseys have been custom made starting at the beginning of each season from the same material that's used for the players' jerseys, and any of the old or worn or tattered jerseys are destroyed. So that just goes to prove just how much respect they pay to UGGA, no matter which edition that it's on through the years. And each of the UGGA mascots has been awarded a varsity letter in the form of a plaque that's identical to those that are presented to Bulldog athletes themselves who letter in their respective sports. So they really hold UGGA in high esteem. And the school even has an UGGA memorial at Sanford Stadium where the past mascots are buried. And before home games, people still go there to lay flowers on their graves. But UGGA 5 definitely stood out as garnering the most attention. And that was highlighted by his appearance on the cover of an April 1997 Sports Illustrated, which declared him the nation's best college mascot. And that's where the claim to fame, especially that Georgia fans will back up, really comes from. And the greatest addition of UGGA, or UGGA 5, was nicknamed McGillicuddy II in honor of one of the greatest Bulldogs in Georgia history, who also served as the Assistant Athletic Director for Public Relations, a longtime tennis coach, and the Sports Information Director, Dan McGill. And it seems like every aspect of UGGA 5's life was interesting, and his birth was no different. Because surprisingly, the family that owned the UGGA puppies, the Sealer family, only became aware that UGGA 4's mate was expecting puppies 10 days before the litter was due. And a notice came back a week after UGGA 4 had passed away that the last one, born on March 6th of 1990, was the only solid white male, and that's when UGGA 5 officially began his reign. And what a reign it became. As a puppy mascot, you really couldn't ask for more fame and notoriety. He was in Clint Eastwood's Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. He was there for Georgia's most collective, successful sporting effort in department history when they claimed 4 NCAA team titles during 1998-1999. This women's swimming and diving team, the women's gymnastics team, the men's tennis, and the men's golf teams all used a little bit of UGGA 5's magic to reach the top. And he had a little bit of a rough side, too, after famously snapping at an Auburn wide receiver after he scored a touchdown on their home turf. But the beloved UGGA 5 passed away in November of 1999, just over 2 months after his retirement. And with a sideline legacy that dates back to 1956, you can see why UGGA is considered the mascot of all mascots, especially when it comes to live animal ones. And there have been 10 Bulldogs that carry that title, and hopefully that continues with the next upcoming season. That brings us to our first break, but when we come back, we're going to head to a Big 12 school to take a look at one of their live mascots.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com health and wellness, or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the College Football Podcast. In the first segment, we went over Ugga, one of the most notable mascots of live animals in college football's history. And in this segment, we're going to talk about an animal that's a little bit bigger than Ugga, and that's Bevo, the mascot for Texas. And Bevo is their sturdy steer and everything you think you would need in a live mascot. He's strong, he's definitely unique, he's universally recognizable, and he always looks camera ready, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. Some people may have different judgments, but Bevo has been rolling the sidelines nonstop since 1916, starting from the annual Thanksgiving rivalry game between the Longhorns and Texas A&M. And this tradition came to be when an alumnus first came up with an idea to purchase a mascot and gathered $124 from other Texas alumni and was able to buy a Longhorn. Originally, the mascot was named Bo and didn't earn his new name until later that year when a few Texas students were forced to get a little bit creative, but more on that in a second. In total, there have been 15 Bevos now, and the current edition, Bevo 15, is a 4-year-old, 1,700-pound Longhorn. And his horns are expected to keep growing until he turns 6. So for 2 more years, he's expected to get even bigger and more menacing. And most Longhorn steers are expected to live into their mid-20s. So hopefully we'll be seeing Bevo 15 for a long time. Bevo 14, the edition before this current one, died during the 2015 season. But luckily for Longhorns fans, they were able to find a replacement Bevo in time for their 100th anniversary season when it kicked off in 2016. But back to the creativity that Texas students took on, the legend of Bevo's name has a lot of origin stories, and the most popular one traces back to the history of Texas and Texas A&M stealing mascots from each other. In 1993, there was an incident where a Texas student stole Texas A&M's mascot from their handler's backyard, and 30 years before that, there's another incident where Texas A&M students swiped Bevo from the state hog farm. But what originally sets off this incredible history of animal thievery is what the origin story for Bevo's name comes from. And this dates back to 1917. And the legend has it that after A&M beat Texas in their 1915 rivalry game, a group of 6 Aggie students stole the mascot in February of 1917. And the branding bunch is what is allegedly called. And what the name is said to come from is the fact that they branded the Longhorn with the score of the game, which was 13-0, and they were trying to pay homage to it. But when Texas students finally recaptured their mascot, they decided to rebrand the rebrand of the mascot by turning the 13 into a B and using the dash in the score to create an E, adding a V before the O, and that is what formed Bevo. But the Texas website themselves claims that Bevo came from the word beeve, which is the plural of the word beef, and is used as a slang term for a cow that's about to be eaten. And sadly, no matter what this true story is, it doesn't sound like the original cow had a great fate, because according to some Aggie sources, the very first Bevo did meet that exact fate that his name is supposed to come from. And he was apparently cooked up in a 1920 barbecue and served to both Texas and Texas A&M officials. So personally, I think both stories are a little bit messed up, and I hope that for this animal's sake that there was no actual branding that went into the name creation, because that would be a little bit unnecessary. But Texas fans and A&M fans alike believe what they want, and they can believe what they want, but the branding version is by far the most popular version of the story behind Bevo's name. And now we ask that maybe you leave the branding of animals in the past, but bring back the Texas and A&M rivalry, so that they can play each other every year, and we can enjoy that. That's definitely something I can get behind. But nevertheless, Bevo is a Longhorn symbol of strength and power, and is one in a long line of beefy mascots that have called Texas home for more than a century now. There are 2 handlers that escort this massive steer on and off the field and supervise during the games. Sometimes they have their hands full, like the time that Bevo quote-unquote greeted Ugga 10 before the 2019 Sugar Bowl. He didn't necessarily reach Ugga, luckily. Ugga was fine, but he did make Hook'em Horns look literal at that point, and ended up scratching a reporter who was caught in the crossfire, and that even triggered a warning letter from PETA afterwards, urging both schools to end the use of live mascots altogether. But given where this tradition is at this point, no matter where an opinion stands on it, it doesn't look like it's set to go anywhere anytime soon. So the Longhorns at one point roamed all over the Great Plains, and even contributed to supporting the economy of the region, and that's kind of how the mascot came into being, or why it became a symbol. And it really started falling into place in 1916, but there have been several different iterations in the years since, and there have been multiple theories regarding the nickname, like we just pointed out, but what everyone can agree on is that Bevo has been part of this tradition and the school for the past century, at the very least. And early additions of the mascot were a little bit more temperamental, like Bevo 2, who gained notoriety for charging at an SMU cheerleader who had to then defend himself with a megaphone. And as dangerous as that sounded, it also makes for quite a little bit of a laugh once you realize that everybody's fine. And Bevo 3 had an instance of running wild across the campus for 2 days after breaking out of his enclosure, and Bevo 5 once scattered Baylor's entire band. So whether Bevo is being sweet or is in fight mode, you can tell that the Longhorn was once an animal that was heavily relied upon and created so much sustenance for thousands of people, especially in the region that he now represents. And you can see why Texas fans love to embody that same energy that they see in their mascot. And that's what places Bevo amongst college football royalty. And that brings us to our next break. But when we come back, we're going to head back to the SEC for another ferocious-looking mascot.
I want to talk to you guys about this amazing product I've been using lately called Hydrant. If you're like me and you want to kick the coffee habit, but you're worried about your energy levels depleting, to avoid the morning sluggishness and that midday slump, you need to make sure you're hydrated. It's super important. And that's where I've been using Hydrant. And for 25% off your first order, you can go to drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC at checkout. Hydrant is basically flavored electrolyte packets you mix directly into your water to make hydrating your body easy and delicious. And what I love about Hydrant, it's backed by research. The formula was developed by Oxford scientists to provide perfectly balanced, efficient hydration. Again, that's drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC for 25% off your first order. Another really cool thing about Hydrant, there's no synthetic colors or artificial sweeteners. The formula is vegan and you can choose between 3 different flavors or a variety pack. So for all my vegan friendly fellows out there, this one's for you. Again, this is drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back to the College Football Podcast. The first 2 segments covered 2 famous mascots, Uga and Bevo, out of Georgia and Texas respectively. And in this segment, we're going to take on another mascot that has a ferocious reputation, and that's Mike the Tiger from LSU. And Mike dates back to 1934, when a group of men, which included the athletic department trainer Chellis Chambers, aka Mike, the athletic director, T.P. Hurd, the swimming pool manager and intramural swimming coach, William Hickey Higginbotham, and an LSU law student named Ed Laborde, decided to bring a real tiger to LSU, which was then known as the Old War School. They collectively raised $750 by collecting 25 cents from each student and purchased a 200-pound 1-year-old tiger from the Little Rock Zoo, which was born in October of 1935 and originally named Sheik. His name was then changed in honor of one of the men from the group that brought him to campus, Mike Chambers, and LSU students were behind this idea so much that they even staged a campus strike to welcome their new tiger mascot to campus in October of 1936. And that is which tiger became the first Mike, and he assumed his duties only 3 days after arriving on campus and reigned at LSU for nearly 20 years, traveling with the team and serving as the official mascot. Mike 1 sadly officially passed away in June of 1956 due to complications from kidney disease at 20 years and 8 months old. Since then, a legacy has been created for Mike the Tiger. And now it symbolizes the heart and soul of LSU athletics, and all of the fans really embrace and embody that. And following the first Mike's death, a fund was established to perpetuate his memory by mounting his pelt in a lifelike manner and displaying him at the university's Louisiana Museum of Natural History, where it still remains to this day. So people who are into seeing that kind of thing and maybe are die-hard LSU fans could still go and visit the museum and see the original Mike the Tiger. But getting back to his story, a few days after his death, a representative introduced a resolution in the Louisiana legislature endorsing the purchase of another Mike the Tiger. On campus, a Mike the Tiger Fund was launched by student body president and fellow students. And in August of 1956, the LSU Board of Supervisors passed a resolution stating that caretaker salaries and maintenance costs for the new Tiger would come equally from student fees and the athletic department. So that brings us to Mike II, who was born in February of 1956 in New Orleans and arrived secretly on campus in September of that same year. His unveiling occurred the next day on September 29th, which was the opening day of football season, and a ceremony was held during which one of the students that helped launch the fund that brought Mike to campus, and it was Parker, presented a check for $1,500 to the superintendent of the zoo where Mike II was born. But there's an interesting mystery that surrounds the second tiger. Legend has it that less than a month after his arrival at LSU, Mike II died of pneumonia at only 8 months old, and reportedly he was then secretly buried under a willow tree along the Mississippi River by the newly appointed AD Jim Corbett, campus police chief C.R. Anderson, and an LSU AD business manager Jack Gilmore. To explain the absence of the second Mike, a statement was issued in the LSU Daily paper on October 23rd, saying that Mike was having trouble adjusting to his enclosure and was there being kept inside until he became more accustomed to the excitement of being a mascot, which is a really interesting explanation when you look back on it in hindsight. So I can only imagine how it was received at the time. But then another cub of the right age was located at Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle, according to Gilmore, and he goes on to testify that several pieces of evidence support that the original Mike II died and was replaced by another young tiger. There are photographs that were taken of Mike II before and after this event was said to happen, and they are clearly two different tigers based off of the facial markings. And when it comes to facial markings on tigers, they're just as unique as fingerprints on humans. And not to mention, there was also a tremendous growth rate in size between the two tigers. So rumors of the death and replacement were denied by the school, of course. The second Mike II resigned at LSU after only one season, and he died at the same zoo where he was born in New Orleans in May of 1958 of complications associated with fractures near his left leg, and it is also not exactly known how or when he sustained those injuries to his leg. So, curious and mysterious at the same time, to say the least, but that is the story of the second Mike the Tiger. Mike III arrived just in time for the national championship season of 1958, and he was introduced to the general public at the first home game of the season against Hardin-Simmons University. And because LSU competed in so many bowl games during the reign of Mike III, his caretakers accumulated quite a few stories that they love to tell about that edition of the Tiger. And one of them, named Joel Samuels, who was also known as the Tiger Man, recalls an LSU-Alabama game when Coach Bear Bryant, at the time was the legendary Alabama head coach, interacted with Mike III. And Samuels said that he had a specific way to get Mike to growl by giving him a simple 3-word command, which was, "Get him, Mike." And Alabama's players were gathering around the Tiger trailer, and Samuels gave the command to Mike to growl, and he did, and it rattled the Alabama players so much that Coach Bryant had to take the handler aside and actually gave him a sideline lecture, telling him that he was never to do anything to upset his players like that again. And as far as we know, there have been no incidents of tigers growling on command ever since. So clearly his message went through loud and clear. But Mike III's reign lasted over 18 years, and during his lifetime he was able to see LSU win not just a national championship, but also 3 SEC championships in 1958, 61, and 70, on top of 8 bowl wins and a 142, 50, and 7 overall record. But sadly, Mike III's time came to an end when he passed away from pneumonia in August of 1976, after the only losing season of his lifetime. Even amongst the crazy backstories of all the different Mike the Tigers, Mike IV definitely stands out as one who has a unique story. And his starts when he was born in May of 1974 and arrived on LSU's campus in August of 1976. But fast forward 5 years to 1981, and he was the victim of a prank where some college pranksters cut the chain to his outer door and the lock of his inner door cage of his enclosure and released him. Then he was seen wandering into the track stadium where he had to be shot with a tranquilizer pistol, actually. And it took 3 shots to sedate him, but he luckily was safely returned to his enclosure and served 14 years at LSU as the mascot before he retired to the Baton Rouge Zoo in April of 1990. But his early retirement wasn't necessarily because of a good reason. He did develop a neurological problem that resulted in mild lameness and had to sadly be put to sleep in March of 1995 due to continuing health complications. But in more positive news, his lifespan of 20 years, 9 months, and 18 days is considered extremely long for a captive tiger. So it is good to see that LSU was able to take care of their mascots in such a delicate and healthy way. And that brings us to Mike 5, who was born in October of 1989 and was introduced at a game against Alabama on the basketball court in February of 1990 before he moved to his home north of Tiger Stadium in April of that year. And of all the mascots that served for LSU, he's been described as the easiest of all of them to handle, and he had a calm and friendly disposition, and during his tenure, he was there for a football national championship, 5 baseball national championships, and incredibly 23 track and field championships. And not to mention that he also saw LSU's sports teams win 37 SEC titles between 1990 and 2007. And Mike 5 lived his last years in great comfort thanks to the support of thousands of LSU fans that really span outside of Louisiana and worldwide and contribute to the I Like Mike campaign to rebuild his habitat. And he moved into that habitat in August of 2005 and received the finest care that could be provided for an animal given that he is in captive, led by the LSU School of Veterinary Medicine. And sadly, Mike 5 also passed away in May of 2007 of renal failure, but his ashes are located in the Adney Museum next to the LSU Alumni Association on their campus. And that brings us to Mike 6, who was born in July 2005, moved into his new home on campus in August 2007, introduced to the community on September 1st, and officially declared the 6th Mike at a ceremony on September 14th of 2007. And he came in at a whopping 450 pounds full grown, and he was infamous for only attending games on Saturdays when he wanted to, and most of the times obviously he would participate, and LSU would have their mascot as expected. So they wait by his trailer and wait for him to make the decision. But in his later years, he hadn't always wanted to attend games and didn't come to any during the 2014 season and only attended one in the 2015 season before he was shut down. And sadly, on October 11th of 2016, Mike had to be humanely euthanized in his night house by LSU's attending veterinarian after suffering from what was called a spinal cell sarcoma, a type of cancer. And last but not least, that leaves us with the current version, Mike 7, who was introduced on the first day of fall semester 2017 and resides between Tiger Stadium and the Pete Maravich Assembly Center on campus. And his pad is decked out as well as you can hope that any animal mascot's living quarters would be decked out. It includes lush plants, a live oak tree, a waterfall, even a stream that comes out of a rocky backdrop and overflows with more plants and trees. So it's good to see that the community around LSU does everything they can to take best possible care of their beloved Mike the Tiger. That brings us to our next break, but after the break, we're going to explore another really well-known dog mascot.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
We're back with the College Football Podcast, and in the first 3 segments, we went over 3 of the most popular live animal mascots in college football, Uga, Bevo, and Mike the Tiger, and in this 4th segment, we're starting back at square one with another popular dog mascot, and there are many dogs in college football, but this one, Smokey from Tennessee, usually comes in near the top of people's rankings, especially when it comes to dogs. And if you're wondering why that is, it's because he's got true athleticism. And while we're used to seeing other breeds like bulldogs or huskies used as mascots, his breed, which is a blue tick coonhound, is really, really unique. And Smokey has the ability to both be intimidating, like when he bites his opponents sometimes, and also make them feel like they're going to melt from how cute he is and how overloaded you feel when you're, looking at a puppy, like how everyone usually reacts to when they're looking at a dog, especially when he's wrapped in a blanket. So, just to give a little background on how popular Smokey is and has always been, really, he was selected as the mascot for Tennessee after a student poll in 1953. After a contest was held. So he started all popularity, essentially. And the desire was to select Coonhound specifically because it's a native breed to Tennessee. And at halftime of that year's Mississippi State game, several hounds were introduced to the crowd, and they were supposed to vote on what their favorites were. And Blue Smokey, brought in by his owner, Bill Brooks, was the last one, and howled loudly when he was introduced, and that just drove the crowd and students crazy, and that is how Smokey essentially became a mascot. But there was one time where Smokey wasn't necessarily everyone's favorite. There was a movement that started in the mid-1950s to replace Smokey, actually, with a Tennessee walking horse. And the alumnus that was responsible for the movement said that a horse would bring more dignity and beauty to the halftime shows at their fields. But luckily for Smokey fans, the idea never really took off. They did try to add a Tennessee walking horse to the sideline at their games until they switched their field to artificial turf, and it became too rough for the horses to make turns safely on. But it's pretty safe to say that of all of the Smokey dogs, Smokey 2 was the one with the most exciting adventures. In 1955, early in Smokey's history, students from Kentucky kidnapped him for 8 days, and they dressed him in a blue and white blanket with a large K and paraded him around at a Kentucky pep rally. Then his captors returned him to Tennessee just before they kicked off. But a week later, 3 Vanderbilt students tried to pull off the same heist, but they missed one little detail. They took the wrong dog, ended up taking an old hunting dog instead. So they didn't really pull that one off. And as if that wasn't enough trouble for one dog to get into, during the 1957 Sugar Bowl, he also got tangled with Bear with Bear. There were a couple shots here and there taken, but luckily Smokey walked away unharmed and okay. Smokey 3's time serving wasn't nearly as exciting, but he did serve the longest out of any of the dogs, between 1964 and 1967, attending 10 bowl games and recording 2 SEC championships during his tenure. Smokey 6, who died in 1991, was the first dog to make the volunteer injury report after suffering heat exhaustion during the 1991 UCLA game, but he was on the sidelines for 3 SEC championships. And when Smokey 9 took up his duties, it was evident that he had a different personality than the dog that came right before him. Smokey 9 was said to be a lot more playful, licking, he would nudge fans. But for 9 seasons, Smokey 8 would stand at attention, quote unquote. He would pose for every picture, he would run perfectly, and all of that must have been a method to good luck, because Smokey 8 was by far the winningest and most successful out of all of the live dogs, racking up an 81% win record, 2 SEC titles, and the 1998 championship while he was serving as mascot. And if that wasn't enough Tennessee mascot love, there's also a costume mascot that appears at every Vols game and has won several mascots championships himself. And the best part about that is that he also has a female counterpart mascot that appears at all of the women's athletic events. So, since 1977, Smokey the Hound has been taken care of by the Alpha Gamma Rho fraternity on Tennessee's campus, and the mascot has gained fame for competing in national mascot competitions, appearing in the Capital One national commercials, and being featured in TV news segments. So not only is the Bluetooth Coonhound an important dog to the state of Tennessee, who officially made it the state dog in August of 2019, but the University of Tennessee themselves have shown just how much Smokey means to alumni and fans by recently adding statues of each dog that has served around their campus. That brings us to our last break, but when we return, the last animal we're going to take a look at is one that roams the skies.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the College Football Podcast. In the first 4 segments, we talked about 2 dog mascots, Ugga and Smokey, Bevo and Mike the Tiger. But in this last segment, we're going to cover Auburn's War Eagle. And first things first about the War Eagle, you have to get one thing straight if you're going to approach an Auburn fan. The War Eagle is Auburn's battle cry, not a mascot, not a nickname. The phrase has a long history and it's deeply significant to Auburn fans, students, family, alumni, friends, anybody who's associated with the school who use it to greet, identify each other. Anywhere you meet an Auburn fan, they'll know the War Eagle battle cry. And it's true that they are the Tigers by mascot, but the War Eagle battle cry is just as popular as any other symbol for Auburn. And the most popular legend behind the battle cry's origins dates back to the first time Auburn and Georgia met up on the football field in 1892. And it centers around a spectator who was also a Civil War veteran, and in the stands that day was an eagle that the old soldier had found on the battlefield during the war. He kept it as a pet for almost 30 years, according to the legend, and witnesses say that the eagle suddenly broke free at this game and began to majestically fly, circle around the field, and as the eagle continued to fly and soar around the field, the team started to gain some momentum, and they were pushing towards the end zone. So fans who were overjoyed that their team was picking it up, and they were looking at the bird's presence as a sign, so the fans began to yell War Eagle to spur on their team, and at the end of the game, the eagle is said to have taken a sudden dive, crashed into the ground, and died on impact. So what a crazy ending to a story at a game, which, if it's allegedly true, would have been crazy to witness, but the War Eagle battle cry lived on anyway, and it became a symbol of the proud spirit that Auburn fans hold close to themselves. And whenever they gather, you'll hear the War Eagle battle cry. It's certainly going to be heard wherever Auburn fans gather together. But the story, as popular as it is, also has possible alternate versions, and they mostly stem from a 1914 game against an opponent, Carlisle, and the toughest player on the opponent's team was a tackle named Bald Eagle, nicknamed Bald Eagle, and he was a really big guy, and they were trying to tire him out, and they began to run a play after play targeting this one player, Bald Eagle, and without even huddling together, the Auburn quarterback would yell Bald Eagle and let the rest of the team know that the play was going to be run at this specific guy. And spectators heard the same thing, but they thought that the quarterback was saying War Eagle. And in unison, they all began to chant, and that's one story for how the War Eagle battle cry came to be. But there's another story that possibly was birthed out of the same game, and that one goes that each time the opponents, Carlisle, had scored during the season, fans and Carlisle players would yell War Eagle at Auburn fans tauntingly. So on this particular day, during this game in 1914, it was Auburn's fans who returned the favor with the battle cry of their own, as an Auburn player scored the only touchdown of that game. So if you're a fan of revenge and redemption, that probably is the story that you're going to want to go with. Another version of the War Eagle story comes from Native American lore, and the legend has it that War Eagle was the name given to the golden eagle by Native Americans who lived on the plains because the eagle had feathers that they used for their war bonnets. But the rarest version of the origin story grew out of a 1913 pub rally at Langdon Hall, where it said that students were gathered the day before a game against Georgia, and a cheerleader told the crowd that if we're going to win this game, we'll have to get out there and fight because this means war, trying to cause a frenzy. And during the frenzy that it became, another student that was dressed in a military uniform noticed that something dropped to the floor. He bent down to pick it and saw that it was the metal emblem of an eagle. And when somebody asked him what he had found, he replied that it was a war eagle. And history was made there, and that became the battle cry, and that echoed out throughout the stadium the next day during their game against Georgia. So as you can see, there are many origin stories. None are really confirmed officially, but it's a fun exchange amongst Auburn fans, and there are probably even more tales out there to find. So that was the birth of the War Eagle battle cry, allegedly. And it wasn't until the 1930s that we first saw an eagle return to Auburn's sideline. And after that eagle's death, there wasn't another live mascot until the 1960s for Auburn regularly. But the War Eagle has been a continuous presence on Saturdays ever since, and now it's part of Auburn's spirit for now over 100 years. And Auburn has purposely continued to carry on this tradition to try and promote wildlife conservation as a part of their educational initiatives with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and their own College of Veterinary Medicine. So they're permitted to house the eagles and use them on hundreds of educational presentations every year, and that includes their very own home games. And that brings us to the story of Spirit as an example. And Spirit was the only bald eagle that has ever flown in Jordan-Hare Stadium, taking flight for the first time in 2001, but it was brought to Auburn in 1998 after being discovered 3 years earlier as an injured fledgling in Florida, and at the educational center on Auburn's campus, Spirit was able to get the care that he needed, but because of how badly damaged his beak was, he was non-releasable. And thanks to a program like the one Auburn runs, he was able to spend his years with the university and soar before kickoff, just like his counterparts, the Golden Eagles, that are usually used as their mascot. But Spirit was a little bit different and a little bit more special because bald eagles are found throughout the state of Alabama, and wild ones sometimes can be seen soaring around the skies in Auburn as well. But as popular as Spirit was, Auburn's most famous war eagle was ironically named Tiger, aka War Eagle 6, and she was hatched in captivity in 1980 and brought to live at Auburn in 86. She was frequently seen on the sideline, and she made her first fly as a free eagle at the Wyoming game in 2000. Tiger was a big part of the program, veterinary program that Auburn runs at their school, and was seen at many games, but also at many educational programs as well, and even was used during the 2002 Winter Olympics. At the Georgia game in November of 2006, Tiger sadly made her last stadium flight and she retired, and a halftime ceremony at that game recognized how much she contributed to the Auburn community and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service conservation missions. Sadly, Tiger's life came to an end in June of 2014, but at the age of 34, she did outlive the average lifespan for a golden eagle. And that brings us up to date at Auburn's 7th War Eagle, a golden eagle named Nova, who was recently retired, and her replacement, a golden eagle named Aria, was named as War Eagle 8. A ceremony marking the transition was supposed to be planned for a halftime of this season's November 23rd game against Samford, and it still remains to be seen whether or not any changes will be made to that schedule. But for anyone who has never been present when the War Eagle makes its pass around Jordan-Hare Stadium, myself included, it's only been described as an incredible event. And the SEC is completely filled with live mascots, that's for sure, but the War Eagle definitely stands out as one of the top members of that elite class of animal representatives. And while Auburn will always proudly be represented by a tiger, the War Eagle is a great way to set yourself apart as a fan base and essentially be able to tell which people are true fans or not, depending on how confused they get. That brings us to our final break, but in the bonus section, we're going to touch on another category that helps schools stand out.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the College Football Podcast. In the first 5 segments, we touched on 5 of the most well-known live animal mascots around the college football world. And they definitely do their part in helping you remember which school is which and setting themselves apart from others that could be similar. There's another category in college football that does the same thing for schools, and that is uniforms. And uniforms can be just as important and identifiable to fans in the stands as a mascot is. And there are a lot of uniforms that help give schools an identity, especially newer ones who are trying to catch up to the traditions of old. So let's get started on that list with the Oregon Ducks. They are by far the most well-known school with outlandish and outrageous uniforms. And they've been doing the interesting uniform thing since the late 90s, when Nike co-founder, who is also an Oregon alum, not really a coincidence there, took an interest in overhauling the team's aesthetics. And over the last 2 decades since then, Oregon has worn some of the most cutting-edge looks in all of sports, and they've definitely garnered attention and a reputation for having the most up-to-date and freshest looking uniforms that you will ever be able to find on a football field. They've experimented with so many color combinations, different logos, different patterns, helmet designs, throwbacks, you name it, Oregon has probably touched on it and has looked good while doing it. Each style they've tried has been different, and now with all of the reputation they've built up around themselves, the Ducks have become trendsetters, because in recent years, now we see so many programs rolling out their own unique, standout, styled uniforms, and there are a lot of great looks that are coming out now, that are out there, but they're rarely as eye-popping and original as anything we've seen from the Ducks within the last 20 years. And for as much as we've seen uniforms and style amongst college football starting to evolve and change, we definitely have the Oregon Ducks to thank for that. Next up on the list is the Michigan Wolverines, and their not yellow, but maize and blue uniforms are a classic. And on top of that uniform, classic color combination is their winged style helmet, and that just makes the ensemble look even better when it's put together. And for a school that plays in such a huge stadium, the Big House, to see that maize and blue pattern, not just on the players, but on the fans themselves, it really helps the point about the uniforms hit home. Next up are the USC Trojans, and USC's Cardinal and Gold uniforms are true old school. The Trojans abandoned their iconic style for a while during the 80s and 90s, but luckily for fans everywhere, they brought it back during the Pete Carroll era, which was iconic for them in so many ways. And now it seems like it's back to stay. But if you take a look at the USC Trojans of old, they definitely made their names for themselves in that classic uniform. And with the spirit of trying to rebuild and reclaim that glory, hopefully the uniforms bring a little bit of that luck back their way. Next up are the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and Indy's blue and gold uniforms would be solid enough on their own to build a reputation for a classic traditional uniform. But then you add in the signature helmets, which a lot of Notre Dame lovers would call flashy, but it's the helmets that puts the uniform over the top. And the paint on the Fighting Irish helmets actually contain real gold, which is outrageous to me. But when you want to look flashy, you got to be flashy for real, and that is in true Notre Dame spirit. Next are the Ohio State Buckeyes, and their scarlet and gray stripe colors are often imitated by other schools, but you can never fully duplicate it. And that largely has to do with the Buckeye stickers that they place on their helmets that add to the program's iconic look. And there have been so many comments about these helmets over the years. One of the most popular being, why do they look like little marijuana plants? And it's really funny when you see it, and people get confused the first time they see it especially. But those are actually part of an incentive program that they do with the players, and they're symbolic. So the players love them, the fans love watching them, and it's a staple in Ohio State football that doesn't seem like it's going to go anywhere anytime soon. Next up is Texas, and the Longhorns put on that burnt orange. It's a shade that they started using for the first time in the 1920s, and it honestly might be the most unique team color in all of college football. It makes their uniforms look totally unique, even separate from other schools that use orange as their primary color. And speaking of schools that have orange in their colors, that brings us to the Clemson Tigers. And they do orange but with a purple twist, and that doesn't normally seem like it would be a color combination that would work, but in this case, for Clemson it does, just like everything else they try lately. They seem to be pulling off this purple and orange accented uniform without any question, and they're not only a traditional color combination, but they're also an eye-popping color combination, because it's very rare to see such seldom used colors come together like this and actually be able to work. And lastly, but certainly not least, are the Boise State Broncos. And they're kind of like in the class of Oregon, but on the group of 5 stage. Because they, just like the Ducks, do not go for traditional at all. Their signature is an all-blue field, and to complement it, they came up with their signature all-blue uniforms. And while it could be a little nauseating and headache-inducing for some people who aren't used to watching that huge pop of color every Saturday on the field in front of you or on TV, but the way that uniforms have also been used by programs like this to update themselves, bring themselves to relevancy, and kind of compete with schools that have older, more storied traditions is why the changing uniform trend has been embraced so much and is now considered one of the best parts of college football. Thanks for listening to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.